What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. Before we get on to the topic, I would love it if you did a few things. Hit the like button, subscribe button, share button, and bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. And then when you are finished, leave me a comment below. That way I can get back to whatever it is that you had to say about the topic. For today's topic, I want to talk about a topic that you all voted on and I am now delivering. I want to talk about the psychology of the old Negro sympathizer. So let's get into it. As you know from a previous video, I described what the old Negro looks like. And I also detailed the behavior of the old Negro. But now I'm talking about something that is a little bit different than the old Negro. And I call this the old Negro sympathizer. One thing that you have to understand about the old Negro sympathizer is that they have a serious duality issue going on. The reason why I call them the old Negro sympathizer versus the old Negro is because their asses are getting old too. They're not quite as old as the old Negroes, but they have the level of age where they have the level of youth that they can sympathize with the sentiments of younger, more vibrant, more codified pro-black blacks. But they also have the sympathetic notions and behaviors where they understand the actions of the older generations and even to some extent mimic them as well too with their own style and their own swagger. Whereas the old Negroes, they tend to be egotistical and open about their Samboism, almost to the point of just not seeing reality as it really is and being out of touch. The old Negro sympathizer is fully aware of their actions, but they are very deceptive and I would even say fake. While an old Negro is extremely selfish, stuck in their ways, arrogant, egotistical, and has no desire to create any form of black empowerment, almost to the point of just straight Samboing and being proud of it. The old Negro sympathizer has some of the same traits, but it's a little bit different, and I really want to go into it. The old Negro sympathizer doesn't want to come off like a Sambo whatsoever. They actually do care, unlike the old Negro. They actually want to have somewhat of this pro-black aesthetic. They want to have this aesthetic like they've done something for the black community. They're the type to do some Sambo-ish things on the low, but then try to create a product or do a service or whatever the case may be that they say is tailored to serve the black community. So they do not like to do anything specifically for black people, but they think that doing something here or there is enough. But if you really pay close attention, a lot of times the old Negro sympathizer has a lot of anti-black or Sambo-ish tendencies as well too. Now the old Negro sympathizer typically, unlike the old Negro, is probably about a Gen Xer. Whereas the old Negro, as I described before, is probably somewhere at the end of the silent generation and then the entire baby boomer generation. The old Negro sympathizer typically, I'm saying typically because there are some outliers here, typically is a Gen Xer. A lot of times these old Negro sympathizers recognize all of the issues with the old Negroes themselves. So they know that there was a problem with the things that they have done in the past and how it has not helped black progression or black empowerment whatsoever. And they also want to try to convince younger generations that they are going to be different. They are going to do things differently. They are going to create things and systems and stuff like that that is going to benefit black people. But if you pay close attention to their behavior, they do little adjacent things to help black society, or that could help black society while helping other people as well. But typically, they are not about black empowerment as a whole. They want to maybe play the pro-black fencer role, like for a lack of better words. If I have a better term, I'll come up with it later and I'll let you know what I'm trying to describe. But you have this Negro sometimes who sits on the fence. In other words, they want to be able to be mainstream while also being pro-black. So they want to be pro-black enough that they're not seen as a Sambo. They're seen as somebody who is productive to the black community. And they also want to be the individual who is in the mainstream, who is able to do whatever they want to do, even if it's off code. They want to be able to, you know, have fun in mainstream media. And a lot of times that includes compromising integrity. But what they like to do is lean on the few things that they may have done appropriately as a crutch to say, I'm not anti-black, I am not a Sambo, because look at the things that I have done here or there. I was once asked this question by, I think, one of the YouTube commenters who came on when I talked about the Shea Butter Mama trope, I believe. It was either Shea Butter Mama or the Shea Butter Samba trope. But when I started talking about the psychology of these individuals, somebody asked me, what is the male equivalent of that? Well, the old Negro sympathizer would be your equivalent to, the closest equivalent you'll get to maybe a Shea Butter Samba. And the old Negro is the closest thing that you'll get to Shea Butter Mama. So when I usually talk about old Negroes, it is unisex, but it's mostly tailored to the men, if I'm being totally honest with you. So for proxy purposes, you can say that this psychology is for a male who is a Gen Xer, who is black, typically foundational black American, and again has that knowledge, ability about the old Negroes letting the younger generations down, and also is trying to play the fence. They're trying to play the side of being a Sambo while also creating a pro-black aesthetic. So I wanted to make it clear that we're typically talking about men in this category. And I'll go a step further. We're actually talking about a lot of the celebrities that you see, because they are great examples of an old Negro sympathizer. They're great examples of this individual who has a cool skill and everybody glorifies them for that cool skill, but they do not have values in trying to empower the black community specifically. Now, they may say that, or they may create something that makes it seem like they're trying to do something for black people, or again, is black adjacent. But typically, they actually only have one purpose, and that's really to serve themselves at the end of the day. And to give you all a few examples, so it doesn't seem like I'm just talking about any old thing, I want to look at a couple different celebrities and also YouTube sensations who define good examples of this trope that I'm talking about. So one good example would be somebody like Kanye West. Kanye West is somebody who recognizes the problems of white supremacy and also recognizes the problems with the old Negroes as well too. And as a result, has tried to start off creating a platform where he is talking about some level of pro-blackness to a certain extent. And he created an empire based off of this aesthetic. Now, what ended up happening was Kanye West had somewhat of a switch up at a certain point, and his platform became about being a contrarian. So we can go into the whys and all that other stuff later because that's not really super important. I'm just talking about the actual mentality here. You can say it was his mother. You can say it was his mental illness. You can say whatever. But the reality is that this brother is making a choice, and at this point, a conscientious choice of what he's trying to build his brand on. But the reality is that with Kanye West, he ended up doing a switch up. Now that he had a platform where black people were into his music and into the things that he was creating, because he really was talking about black empowerment to a certain extent, or at least what seemed to be pro-black adjacent, which is, I think, a better way to describe it. He went from doing that to just straight up samboing. I mean, this brother was sitting there trying to cozy up to Trump, talking about, he was wearing the Make America Great Again hat. He was sitting there with the Confederate flag jacket. He was sitting there with a White Lives Matter t-shirt next to Candace Owens. And he was doing all these other Sambo-ish things and cooning for butter biscuits. And on top of that, too, this brother went and kicked it and married an Armenian chick who was essentially a hoe. She was essentially a hoe who was getting around, smashing every black entertainer, celebrity, etc. that she could get her hands on and her ass on. Her fake ass, that is. But anyway, if you look at it, he doesn't actually have pro-black values. He is pro-black adjacent because he shows this image of a black person that seemingly has an awareness of black and of what it means to create black empowerment, and also what the issues were back in the day, such as, again, white supremacy, and then even like things with the old Negroes. He seemed to have started off on that wave, but then ended off in this Sambo-ish light. What it shows you is that anybody can go back and look at Kanye and say, although he has this contrarian gimmick, look what he used to do. He used to talk about, you know, all the problems with black people in the black community in albums like College Dropout and things like that. So that's now a justification to what he's doing now. Or the idea that he was calling out the Jews when he said what he said about a year ago. So that was his now idea of going back to those of us who did not fall for the okie doke and saying, you know what, I want to get right with pro-black society. So what I'm going to do is say something that, although it's controversial, the pro-blacks will back me up, because he was under the idea that we would fall for what he was trying to do at that moment. But the problem is that may convince other black people that he's somebody who deserves respect. But for a lot of us in new black media, we had already, you know, washed our hands to Kanye West because of the fact that we knew that he was samboing so much. And so he really didn't create a good base with us. So that's the problem, is that some of these old Negro sympathizers think that because they created somewhat of a black adjacent aesthetic, that they ended up creating a camaraderie with us when we see through the bullshit and we see the selfishness and the selfish intent, because we know with Kanye, this is a part of his contrarian brand. Another good example of this trope would be someone like Charlemagne the God. Charlemagne the God is somebody who creates this black aesthetic because he is the most sensational person on The Breakfast Club and has always been. Whenever you think about The Breakfast Club, Charlemagne the God is the first person that comes to mind. And I will even say that a lot of The Breakfast Club interviews that I saw when I first started watching it actually were quite interesting and entertaining, and I think insightful in some cases, because he used to have a lot of people who were pro-black on there, like the Tariq Nasheeds, and I know y'all may not like him. I know a lot of people talk about him, Boyce Watkins and people like that. It made it actually interesting to watch. But if you look now, Charlemagne the God is kind of on some Democratic Shield type stuff. So it's almost as if, you know, he and the rest of the people in the Breakfast Club were trying to create this aesthetic where black people can trust this space as a good news space for black people that is unbiased and also provides great interviews and also provides them the knowledge of what is happening in the world. And to a certain extent, they do that. But the problem is that there now is somewhat of a bias there. If you look at people like Charlemagne the God going on and talking about how he's now shilling for, you know, Kamala Harris, you know, you can also see how that was problematic and how softball he went with people like Joe Biden when he had him on there. And Joe Biden was sitting there talking about how if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. You know, he didn't really have a lot of criticisms there. So I'm bringing up that point to basically say that it actually is biased. So if he lied about something as big as that, what other type of thing would he be lying about? And from my perspective, it would be the aesthetic in general. It's the idea that they have influenced and created this trusted brand for black people, or a hub for black people. And as a result, people will respect his opinion based on things that are going on in the black community. But then it turned into a Democratic Shield platform instead of being unbiased and doing things specifically for black people. Because if he really was about black people, then he wouldn't be shilling. He would be saying that we need tangibles for black people on this platform. But we already know what's kind of going on there. And that's why, again, I said that people who are in this old Negro sympathizer generation, they love to create this idea of having a pro-black or black adjacent aesthetic, but then doing some really silly, selfish, or Sambo-ish shit kind of on the side. Now, we have two Gen Xers at this point. You have Kanye West and you have Charlamagne the God. So now let's look at other examples of. Y'all ain't gonna like this one, but this one is one that you need to hear. Ice Cube is another example of this. Ice Cube is somebody who actually went much further than the two people that I actually just talked about. Ice Cube is somebody who has seemed to have a camaraderie with black society. He even created the Contract for Black America, which would further make it seem like he has this camaraderie with black society. But then Ice Cube also did this thing where he was showing he was actually making speeches kind of in the media talking about how, you know, he's all about the black family structure and allowing or creating a business so that his black children are able to do the same thing that white kids do, which is that they have a business to fall back on if things don't go right, instead of having them work for people who don't like them. So he went on and on about this stuff. He even did the whole thing where he refused the job, if you know what I mean. So this is something that was very important to a lot of us in pro-black society, because we knew about Tuskegee and all this other stuff and what they were trying to push. So he had everything, the whole recipe of what is needed in somebody who is pro-black. But that conversation where he was buddying up with Tucker Carlson tells you everything that you need to know about Ice Cube, especially when he talked about how we need to there's too much of an emphasis on race and things like that. It's all about who you are cool with, all about who you get along with, who you vibrate with, and things like that. So what he's trying to do is basically say that he's almost putting the onus on black people to say that we're the ones who always talk about race, and that it is overblown and it is blown out of proportion. This is not something that any of us in the new black media or who are pro-black would actually say. So what that tells you is that he's trying to create a wedge and basically say that we are the ones who are blowing this out of proportion, while conveniently ignoring the idea that we have IDs that tell us to classify what our race is. We have the census that asks us to classify what our race is. We have applications for jobs that ask us what our race is. So that shows you that the dominant society has this obsession with knowing what different people's races are and keeping tabs on it at all times. So how in the hell can we actually be the ones who blow this out of proportion when they have created an entire system that is based on race and always identifying those things 24/7 to keep tabs on black people? I don't really understand that, but here's the thing. Ice Cube, I believe, understands that, but he was trying to play up and get in good with the right-wing media when he did what he did. And his ideals to a lot of black people who were on that Democratic side already kind of felt that way. So he was going full force into this. He was trying to basically make it seem like, you know, it was a good way to get in with that type of media to be able to support his messages and things like that. But realize that when it came to, you know, the contract for new black media, it really hasn't gone anywhere. Whatever happened to that? That's something that isn't even really discussed anymore. Matter of fact, ever since that conversation, he didn't even discuss it anymore whatsoever, as far as I've seen. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I haven't seen it at all. And a lot of y'all are going to go on and say, it was a chess move. It was a chess move. It was a chess move. What fucking chess move was it? Because the nigga really didn't do anything. And quite frankly, if you go back, listen to people like Khalid Muhammad. He talked about how Ice Cube got scary on him. Ice Cube got fearful on him, and Ice Cube did not deliver in so many words when he was talking about trying to fight against like racial oppression and when it came to black empowerment. And what's funny is that Ice Cube had songs where he talked about how he wasn't, he in a way kind of dogged Eazy-E and basically said that, you know, he wouldn't be the type of person to be trying to have dinner with the president. So in other words, trying to basically create a camaraderie with a government that is oppressive. That was the allegory there. And essentially him trying to get in good with the white media is exactly what he turned around he did later. What it shows you is that there is a trend of these old Negro sympathizers having hope at first and then losing it and then trying to do what is best for them at a certain point. But then if somebody criticizes them, they can fall back and say, well, I done did this, I done did that, yada, yada, yada. So they make it a thing of here are my accolades instead of saying this is a continuous struggle that I need to do and I need to try to be a part of until justice is actually met. You don't just kind of do some things and then give up on it and say, oh, well, you know, that was that, but I've moved on to other things. But just so you know, I did do this. So just so you're aware. So I need to make it clear that the old Negro sympathizer has this mentality like if I do a little something here, I can kind of move on and do other things and it's not my responsibility anymore. When in fact, it is the responsibility of the entire black community, if you are pro-black, to create black empowerment for society. And the other thing I would say too is just because you do that doesn't mean that I should now glorify you because you did something here. You need to finish the job. You don't get brownie points for trying and then quitting. The last example I want to give, and you all aren't going to like this, and it is what it is Kevin Samuels. Now, I want to make it clear because I know a lot of y'all are going to flood the comments and you all are going to whine and bitch and moan about, especially you dudes, because I know how a lot of you Negroes are. When it came to Kevin Samuels, y'all were a bunch of damn groupies. But let me be clear. Kevin Samuels was somebody when it came to relationship advice that I thought was on it. 75% of what he said, maybe even 80, to me was pretty accurate. I thought that he was on the money and he had the right idea with what he did in his platform. But Kevin Samuels, I truly believe, was only doing what he was doing for Kevin Samuels. As a matter of fact, to some extent, he said that. He actually said something about, you know, wanting to be filthy rich. And if what he's doing happens to help people, it just helps people. He said that to some extent. I'm paraphrasing, but the point is that he was doing what he was doing because he knew that it was a thing that people liked, that people enjoyed, and that he thought would also be helpful. But the whole plan was for him to have a lot of money. And there were some things that he would throw in there that made him seem like, oh, he might actually be pro-black. Because he talked about Claude Anderson before, and he also talked about, you know, the issues in the black community and what he really wants to fix. He also had these different sessions where he taught black men about what to do when they are in corporate America. So he did a lot in that aspect. He had the great skills. He had a great marketing plan. But ultimately, I know that Kevin Samuels was doing it because if he says that, then it's going to make it seem like he cared, but he did not really care. And I'm going to tell you why, because if you listen to some of the things that he actually did, it shows you that there is some inconsistencies with the whole idea of black empowerment and pro-blackness. One of the things that he did was he said that black women were a bigger problem than white supremacy. Another thing that he did was he sat there and he big-upped Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell is a well-known coon. If you are big upping somebody like that, it shows your own values and the people who you admire. The next problem that I had with Kevin Samuels was the fact that he kind of was on that old nigga wave where he didn't feel like the older generation owed the younger generation anything. This shows that he does not have a vision for the way that black progression and empowerment should actually go. He does not have a desire to create an empire for black folks. He only has a desire, again, to help himself. And if he does something or a little something in the meantime, then that should be good enough. So my problem is that Kevin Samuels was that type of individual. And even if you look at some of the relationships that he himself actually got into, it wasn't pro-black. Think about it. The last chick that he messed with before he passed, unfortunately, was not black at all. The black family structure should have a black man and a black woman if you are a pro-black individual. But the problem is that he was actually kicking it with somebody who wasn't even black as the last person who he even did anything with. So what that tells you is that he's somebody who can be black adjacent and does things that could help black people. But ultimately his goal was, and again, it goes back to that rule that I had. It either is selfish or it is Sambo-ish. And he falls into that category. So again, I'm not knocking the man for his talents and his skills. I think he had it. Although I do also believe that he bit a lot of that off of Jason Black and Tariq to a certain extent, although Tariq is clearly cool with it. The point that I'm trying to make is that there is a clear sign that he created a platform for himself and marketed it in a way that created sensationalism and a little bit of hoopla to a certain extent. And as a result, it polarized people and got him a lot of attention, which therefore created a lot of dollars. But he was not trying to actually do anything to empower Black society as a whole with his messages. He just did things that were Black adjacent. So a lot of you all are probably going to hear this and you're going to say, well, what did you really expect for him to do? Yada, yada, yada. My point is that when you are in Black society, you have your skills, but you should be using your skills to empower the Black community as a whole, creating systems, creating things that are actually going to really be for Black people exclusively. You're going to try to do things to help people get the tangibles that they need. That means in the political sense. That means in an entrepreneurial sense, in those types of things. There's a certain camaraderie that you're supposed to have. You're not supposed to say, hey, I did a few things that look cool, but there's no like actual substance. There's no actual empire that was built, because even though Kevin Samuels helped Black men to do certain things in corporate America, that's not any type of business or system that a lot of them can kind of fall back on. That just helps them to be able to handle being in the dominant society and working amongst them. You know, when you think about Ice Cube, the contract of Black America, it sounds good, but he didn't go anywhere with it. When you think about Charlemagne, he just has a Black news base, or seemingly a Black news base that ended up becoming a Democratic shield base. And then when you look at Kanye West, I mean, he had all these Black messages, but what has he done for Black people at all? So I go back to basically say, the problem is that they're not creating mechanisms for Black people as a whole to be able to succeed exclusively. These people, especially folks like Ice Cube and even Kanye West, could, if they wanted to, create their own Black studios where they have their own Black entertainment and all this other stuff, and they hire Black people and that type of thing, almost like a Tyler Perry, but with like the uncodedness. But they don't want to do these types of things. They want to be able to be filthy rich for themselves and create an aesthetic that allows you to keep supporting them for doing the stuff that they're already doing. And I want to make it very clear for those of you all who are like, I'm so confused, I have no idea what you're saying, blah, blah, blah. I can't comprehend. I have the intelligence of a pen cap. I need you all to understand something. When it comes to celebrities and helping the Black community, Black celebrities that is, I want to make it clear that I actually I'm not mad because they are not doing anything for Black society or trying to create a lane specifically for Black people. I'm not upset about that. What I don't have a problem with is them basically trying to create this idea of giving them, of us being burdened to give them brownie points because they did something that looks like a pro-Black aesthetic. So in other words, I'm not necessarily mad because you didn't do anything, because I know the whole idea of most celebrities is to be there to do something for no one else but themselves. But don't sit there and say that I need to call you pro-Black or somebody who is about Black empowerment or Black progression or has made a strong camaraderie with new Black media just because you did your skill or you did something cool with the skills that you have. So I want to make it clear that the whole idea is that you don't get a consolation prize for doing something. You get respect when it comes to pro-Blackness when you actually create empires for people, not when you are glorified for the way you make Black people look. All right, y'all, I hope you all enjoyed this video and I hope you all understood what I had to say. Again, all this confusion shit, and I don't know, you're talking in circles, and really it's that your brain isn't turned on if you have one. I hope you all got it. I hope you all got the message. But anyway, y'all, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be talking to you soon. Peace.